The night was thick with silence, broken only by the flickering buzz of the fluorescent lights above the parking lot. A man in a hoodie sprinted between the rows of cars, clutching a crowbar. Behind him, the security guard, slender, quiet, and often mocked for his slow manner of speech, moved with startling speed. In a flash, the thief was on the ground, immobilized, face pressed against the cold concrete. The stunned bystanders whispered in disbelief. How did he do that so fast? The police officers moved quickly, one of them grabbing the thief's arms while the other snapped handcuffs around his wrists. The man groaned, still winded from the slam, but he didn't resist now. Whatever fight he had came to an abrupt end. The moment Daniel had put him on the ground, "Damn," the first officer muttered as he helped the thief up. "He's already gift-trapped." The second officer turned to Daniel. "What did you do to him?" Daniel adjusted his cap, his eyes shifting toward the crowd that had gathered. "Just held him. Held him," that's what he said. As though he hadn't just executed a throw most professionals struggled to perfect. The bystanders weren't satisfied with that answer. A woman in a red coat, still clutching her phone, blurted, "That was not just holding him. You flipped him like a rag doll." Younger man chimed in, phone still recording. "Bro, I got the whole thing on video. It's going viral, man. Viral." Daniel's stomach tightened. Viral. The word carried a weight he didn't like. He didn't want attention. He didn't want cameras in his face, dragging up questions about who he was and what he used to be. He wanted quiet. That was why he took this job. But tonight, quiet had been broken. The thief's view, the thief, meanwhile, seethed. He had chosen the lot for its reputation. Quiet, neglected, barely guarded. Everyone knew the night security was a pushover. It's easy. Job. Easy score. But the man who grabbed him wasn't the pushover he'd expected. That grab, it hadn't been clumsy or desperate. It was sharp. Exact. The thief's shoulder still ached from the way it had been twisted. His pride burned worse. He spat at the ground, glaring up at Daniel. "What the hell are you, huh? Some kind of ninja?" Daniel didn't answer. He only stared, his eyes calm but unreadable. That silence unnerved the thief more than any words could have. The whispering crowd by now, the crowd had swelled. Mall employees who had just clocked out lingered. Shoppers stopped mid-walk. Even the couple who had been arguing stood together now, united in shock. "That's the same guard who always just stands by the doors, right?" Someone whispered, "Yeah, the slow one. Not slow tonight. Guess we were wrong about him." Daniel heard them. He always heard them, every time they called him the fool or the slow guy. Never answered, because answering meant admitting he cared. But tonight, something about the shift in their tone struck deep. Respect hesitant, but real. A flashback stirring as the police read the thief his rights. Daniel's gaze drifted. The way the man had struggled. The way the crowd had gasped it pulled at something buried. For a moment, he wasn't in a parking lot under flickering lights. He was under a brighter glare spotlights bouncing off a white tatami mat. The air, thick with the roar of a stadium. His body younger, faster, clad in a white GI. His name echoing in chants from the crowd. His opponent gripping his sleeve, straining to hold against him, and then nip on the throw. The slam, the roar of victory. Blinked, and the vision faded. The roar of the crowd tonight was softer, more scattered. But the feeling in his chest tit was the same. The officer's curiosity, the taller officer, badge glinting in the neon light, approached Daniel again. "You sure you've never been on a mat before?" he asked, half joking. "'Cause that right? That was textbook martial arts." Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "Just did my job." The officer gave him a long look, as though he knew there was more beneath the surface. "But he didn't push it." "Well, whatever you did, it worked. Saved us a hell of a chase." He patted Daniel on the shoulder before turning back to the thief. Mockery turned to respect near the back of the crowd. The young man in the leather jacket, who had mocked Daniel earlier, couldn't stop replaying what he had seen. It called the guard slow, useless, even stupid. But that flipped the speed, the control it shattered every assumption. He muttered to his friend. "I think I owed that guy an apology, you think?" His friend replied. "He just put a dude twice his size on the ground like it was nothing. If he wanted, he could fold you in half." The leather jacket guy swallowed, suddenly feeling very small. Daniel's quiet exodus, the police loaded the thief into the back of the cruiser. Daniel began to walk away. He didn't wait for thanks. He didn't linger for questions. He simply resumed his patrol, flashlight in hand. As though nothing had happened, but everything had. People watched him differently now. They whispered less, stared more. Even those who had mocked him felt a shift in their chests. The man they had dismissed, the man they had laughed at, had just proven himself in a way none of them could deny. Daniel didn't bask in it. His steps were the same, slow and steady, but his thoughts swirled. The weight of the memory he had tried so hard to bury pressed harder against him. The tatami, the medals, the injury, the fall. He shook his head, forcing the images away. Tonight was about the parking lot, about doing his job, nothing more. Yet deep down, a quiet truth stirred. Once a warrior, always a warrior, and no matter how much he tried to bury it, his past had just found a way back to him. The parking lot returned to silence after the chaos of the attempted theft, but Daniel's mind didn't rest. Each step of his patrol echoed with memories he hadn't invited, memories he had spent years trying to keep buried, the way his body had moved tonight, the reflex. The precision wasn't an accident. It wasn't instinct from nowhere. It was the ghost of a life he had once lived. A life he had abandoned but could never truly erase. As he walked between the rows of cars, the hum of the fluorescent lights faded. In their place rose the thunder of applause. The arena 10 years earlier. The air in the arena was electric, filled with the roar of thousands. Banners waved, fans shouted, and the spotlight burned hot against the tatami mat. Daniel stood at the center, dressed in his crisp white GI, his belt tied tight around his waist. His hair was shorter then, his shoulders broader, his eyes sharper with the fire of ambition. Reyes. The announcer's voice boomed. Daniel Reyes of the United States. The crowd erupted. His chest swelled with pride. He had fought his way here through grueling qualifiers, endless training sessions, and nights where his body begged for rest, but his spirit demanded more. His opponent bowed from across the mat, and Daniel bowed in return. The referee signaled. The match began. The dance of Judo, two outsiders. Judo looked like chaos, two men grappling, pushing, pulling. But to Daniel, it was art. It was balance, timing, patience. It was the dance of leverage. It's the science of turning another's strength against them. His opponent lunged, gripping his sleeve. Daniel shifted, feet sliding silently on the mat. He felt the man's weight, the pull of his balance, the tension. In his grip, in a heartbeat, he saw the opening. Shane O'Daniel pivoted, lowering his center of gravity, his back against his opponent's chest. In one smooth motion, he pulled the man over his shoulder and sent him flying. The slam reverberated through the mat, and the referee's hand shot up. Ippon, victory. The crowd roared. Daniel raised his fist, a rare show of triumph, before bowing respectfully. For that moment, he was untouchable. The grind behind the glory people saw the throws, the victories, the medals. They didn't see the hours behind them, the early mornings. When Daniel rose before dawn to run miles through cold streets, the afternoons in the dojo, repeating the same grip, breaks and throws until his muscles screamed, the bruises, the sprains, the ice baths that left him shivering. He lived on discipline. Where others partied, he trained. Where others gave excuses, he pushed harder. His world was narrow to Tommy's sweat, repetition, but it was enough, or so. He thought. The first crack had happened during a training session, not even a competition. A careless moment, a bad landing. His opponent's weight came down wrong, twisting Daniel's knee with a sickening pop. Pain shot through him like fire. He tried to stand but collapsed. Coaches rushed in, shouting, and within minutes he was being carried off the mat. The diagnosis was brutal. Torn ligaments. Surgery required. Recovery uncertain. You'll fight again, they told him at first. With rehab, you'll come back stronger. He clung to that hope, even as he lay in bed with his knee wrapped and swollen, even as months of therapy turned into a year. But the truth was merciless. His knee never regained the same strength, the same explosiveness. He could throw, but not with the speed and force he once commanded. And at the elite level, fractions of a second meant everything. The betrayal when Daniel tried to return, he expected support. But instead, he found the cold indifference of a system that valued results over loyalty. His coach, once his fiercest advocate, pulled him aside after a failed qualifier. "Daniel," the coach said, not unkindly but firmly, "you don't have it anymore. The young guys are faster, stronger. It's time to step aside." Step aside. Like he was nothing more than an old piece of equipment being shelved. Daniel wanted to argue, to scream that he still had fight left in him, but deep down, he knew the truth. His knee betrayed him with every match, every sprint, every desperate attempt to return to form. The invitations stopped coming, sponsors disappeared. The sport moved on, and Daniel was left behind. The quiet descent without Judo Daniel was adrift. His life had revolved around it for so long that without it, he was hollow. He tried odd jobs, but nothing stuck. He tried to coach, but watching others compete only twisted the knife deeper. He drank more than he should have, fell into silence, and withdrew from the people who once cheered for him. His family worried, but he waved them off. Eventually, he stumbled into security work. It was simple. Walk the lot, check the doors, file reports. No one expected anything from him, and that was what he wanted. It's a place to disappear, and disappear he did. The present crashes back, but tonight, the disappearance ended. The thief's body slamming against the concrete had awakened something dormant. The crowd's reaction, the gasps, the applause stirred echoes of the arenas. For a fleeting second, Daniel had felt alive in the way only competition ever made him feel, and he hated that he liked it, because the more he remembered, the more he hurt the mirror. Soon after finishing his patrol, Daniel returned to the small security office tucked at the edge of the lot. Outside, a cracked mirror hung above the sink. He looked at his reflection, older, thinner, eyes shadowed with weariness. He pulled off his cap, ran a hand through his graying hair, and whispered to the reflection, "You're not him anymore." But deep down he knew that wasn't entirely true. The tatami might have been behind him, but the fighter remained. Tonight the world had seen a glimpse of it. The next day, the mall hummed with ordinary life again. Families drifted in and out of stores, children tugged at their parents' hands, and the smell of fried food floated from the food court. It was the same cycle Daniel knew too well. People arriving, shopping, leaving, their cars flowing in and out like a tide. For Daniel, the night before still lingered like a shadow. Every step reminded him of the thief he had taken down, the look of shock in the bystanders' eyes. He could almost hear their voices again. "Did you see that? He's not just a guard." That was insane. But daylight had a way of erasing the extraordinary. By morning, Daniel was once again invisible. The co-workers, the other guards on the day shift, treated him the way they always had, with a smirk, joke, a shrug. "Morning, Reyes," said Jeff, the youngest of the bunch. He leaned against the break room table, sipping coffee, a grin tugging at his mouth. "Still doing your turtle walk around the lot?" Another guard, Marcus, chuckled. "Yeah, don't trip over your own feet out there. We'd hate to lose our entertainment." Daniel said nothing. He never did. He poured himself a cup of lukewarm coffee, nodded once, and left the room behind him. The laughter started up again. "You ever say more than 3 words?" Jeff whispered. "Not unless you count grunts," Marcus replied. They didn't know about last night. The night shift rarely made headlines in the guard's logbook. Daniel hadn't written much, just attempted theft, suspect detained, police called. No elaboration, no details. That was his way. Customers' eyes later, as Daniel patrolled. The lot customers passed him with the same indifference as always. Some gave him a polite nod, most ignored him entirely, and a few gave him the side like he was less a person than a fixture. Part of the asphalt and light poles, children, sometimes stared openly. One boy whispered to his mother, "Why does that man walk so slow?" The mother hushed him, giving Daniel an apologetic smile before ushering her child away. Daniel didn't take offense. He was used to it. People always mistook his deliberate pace for sluggishness, his silence for stupidity. He let them, but deep down, there was a weight. It pressed against him every time someone laughed, every time someone looked through him. The mockery grows it wasn't just coworkers and strangers. Some of the mall employees openly teased him at the electronics store. 2 clerks leaned by. Doorway as Daniel passed, "There goes OL slow-mo," one said, just loud enough for him to hear. "Don't move too fast, man. You'll scare the pigeons," the other added. They laughed. Daniel kept walking at the coffee shop. The barista, who worked nights, would sometimes imitate his halting way of speaking when he ordered, "Sa coffee," she'd stammer, mocking him. Her coworkers giggled behind the counter. Daniel never corrected them. He never explained that his slow speech wasn't stupidity, it was choice. He chose words carefully, spoke only when needed. But to them, silence was weakness, and weakness was something to ridicule. Why he endured? There were nights when Daniel returned home to his small apartment and stared at the ceiling, wondering why he tolerated it. Why he stayed in a job where respect was scarce and laughter was abundant. The truth was simple, because it was quiet. He didn't need glory. He didn't need people chanting his name. He'd once craved that, lived for it. And it had nearly destroyed him when it was taken away. Now he wanted nothing but peace. Even if peace meant mockery, the one kind soul not everyone laughed. Maria, custodian who worked late shifts, often crossed paths with him in the empty halls after closing. She never mocked him, never sneered. She simply greeted him with a warm smile. "Evening, Mr. Reyes," she'd say. "Evening," he'd reply. Once, when she caught coworkers snickering behind his back, she turned on them sharply. "Shame on you," she scolded. "Do you know what it means to guard this place every night? You think it's easy? He deserves your respect." The coworkers muttered and walked away, embarrassed. Daniel had nodded to her in silent thanks. Maria was the only one who seemed to see him not as a fool, but as a man. His private rituals, despite the mockery, Daniel maintained small rituals that kept him grounded every night before patrol. He stretched shoulders, arms, legs movements drilled into him from years on the mat. He moved slowly but with precision. His body remembered what his mind wanted to forget. Sometimes when no one was around, he shadow practiced grips and throws in the dim light of the lot, just motions, nothing dramatic, but enough to keep the memory alive, enough to remind himself. He was still capable. He never let anyone see. To them, he was the fool. That was the mask he wore, the mask that protected him from questions he didn't want to answer. The boiling point 2 nights before the theft. Daniel was making his rounds when he overheard Jeff and Marcus again. They were leaning against the wall near the entrance, laughing. "You ever wonder if Reyes even knows what day it is?" Jeff said. "Probably still thinks it's 1980, Marcus replied. "Nah, he's probably counting the cracks in the sidewalk right now." They both laughed. Daniel passed them without a word, his face calm. But inside, something stirred. A quiet flame. Not of anger, he had long since burned out that emotion, but of resolve. He didn't need to defend himself with words. One day life would speak for him. The hum of the fluorescent lights above the parking lot seemed louder than usual, buzzing like restless insects. Midnight hung heavy over the mall. Most of the cars sat untouched, silent under the dull glow, except for one silver sedan parked. Near the back, that was where it began. The spark of trouble, the sound came first. The metallic clatter of a crowbar against glass. Then, the shattering crash of a window breaking. Daniel was halfway across the lot, his flashlight beams sweeping lazily across rows of cars. But the moment the sound hit his ears, his body tightened. His steps slowed, his senses sharpened. His eyes locked on the figure in a gray hoodie crouched by the sedan, stuffing something into a backpack. The thief was quick, practiced. He had done this before. Daniel's hand tightened on the flashlight. His other hand brushed against the radio clipped to his belt. He could call it in, Wait for the police. That was the protocol, but instinct told him there wasn't time. The first. Command, hey. Daniel's voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Calm, steady, certain. The thief's head jerked up. His eyes, dark and wide, fixed on the guard walking slowly toward him. He sneered, muttered something under his breath, pulled the backpack tighter. Then he bolted. The chase's sneakers slapped against the asphalt as he sprinted between rows. His breath came quick, his heart pounding. He didn't expect much. Trouble. This was just a guard. He'd heard the rumors. Slow, dumb, useless, easy to shake. But when he risked a glance back, he froze. The guard wasn't running full tilt, wasn't flailing or gasping. It was walking long, purposeful strides, steady as a hunter tracking prey. That calmness unnerved the thief. He pushed harder, weaving between cars, cutting sharp turns. He thought, outpaced him, outlast him. But Daniel didn't chase where the thief was. He moved where the thief would be. The snap of motion, then it happened. Daniel's body coiled, every muscle aligning in silent precision. In 3 strides, his pace shifted from deliberate to explosive. He cut the angle, closing the gap in an instant. The thief felt a sudden tug at the back of his hoodie sharp. Exact, impossible to shake. What the? Before he could react, Daniel's other arm slid under his shoulder, his body pivoting. With surgical accuracy, thief's feet left the ground. The world turned upside down. The throw it wasn't brute strength. It was leverage, timing, balance, the essence of judo. Daniel rotated, his hips dropping low, and the thief's momentum betrayed him. The crowbar clattered uselessly against the pavement as the thief's body lifted, flipped, and slammed into the cold concrete. The sound echoed. A dull, heavy thud. The thief's lungs emptied in a single gasp. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't move, and then Daniel was on his knee, pressing into his chest, arm twisted in a lock that paralyzed. Resistance, silence in the lot for a moment. The parking lot was still. Even the buzzing lights seemed quieter. Then came the voices. "Oh my God," a woman shouted. "Did you see that?" a man exclaimed. He flipped him. Phones came out, screens glowing as people recorded. The thief groaned, trying to wriggle free, but Daniel's hold was unyielding. Not too much force, not too little, just enough to keep the man pinned. Helpless. The thief's mind panic flooded the thief's chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The guard was supposed to stumble, to hesitate, to be too slow to catch him. But this man's grip was iron. His face was calm, his breathing steady. It was like fighting a wall that moved with purpose. "What the hell are you?" the thief gasped. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The crowd's transformation among. The crowd gathering at the edge of the lot were people who had laughed at Daniel for years. "That's the slow guy." One whispered, "No way. Did you see how fast he moved? That was professional. It was like UFC or something." A young man in a leather jacket, who had mocked Daniel just hours earlier, felt his cheeks burn with shame. He whispered, I didn't know." His friend elbowed him. "Yeah, nobody did." Police arrival dawned. Blue lights cut across the asphalt as police cruisers screeched to a halt. Officers jumped out, expecting a chase. Instead, they found the thief already subdued, immobilized by a guard who barely broke a sweat. The lead officer approached cautiously. "You got this handled?" Daniel nodded once, releasing the arm lock only when the cuffs clicked into place. The officer stared, impressed. "That was, hell, I don't even know what that was." "But you did good." The crowd erupted into applause. A polite clap and reel, genuine applause. Cheers even. For the first time in years, Daniel was not invisible. Daniel's calm exit, he didn't bask in it. He didn't smile, didn't bow, stood, brushed off his uniform, and picked up his flashlight. His patrol wasn't over. There were, still, cars to watch, shadows to guard, as he walked back into the lot, leaving the thief and the flashing lights behind. Whispers followed him, but these whispers weren't mocking. They were filled with awe. The next morning, the parking lot buzzed with something Daniel hadn't felt in years' eyes. People looked at him, not with annoyance, not with smirks, not with dismissive glances. They looked at him with curiosity, with admiration, with the disbelief of people who had witnessed something they couldn't quite explain. The video had started online, by sunrise. The video had hit social media. Someone had captured the entire thing, the thief breaking the window. Daniel's calm approach, the sudden burst of speed, the perfect throw, the effortless pin. The clip spread fast. Parking lot guard takes down thief in seconds. This dude's a judo master. Real-life action movie in my mall parking lot. By mid-morning, the video had been shared thousands of times. Customers arrived at the mall whispering about it. Employees replayed it on their phones during breaks, and Daniel, making his slow rounds as usual, became the center of attention without even trying. Customers' reactions. A woman approached him as he walked past the entrance. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice hesitant. "You're the one in the video, right? The guard who, you know?" Daniel paused, nodded once. Her eyes lit up. "My husband showed me. I couldn't believe it. You were amazing." Before Daniel could respond, she added softly, "Thank you for keeping us safe." She hurried off, leaving Daniel standing in silence. Later, a group of teenagers walked by. One of them raised his phone like a camera. "Hey man, can I get a selfie with you? You're a legend." Daniel frowned slightly, shook his head, and kept walking. The teen lowered his phone, confused but still grinning. "Dude, that guy's a beast." It was the children who made him pause. That afternoon, a little boy and girl, siblings no older than 10, tugged at his uniform sleeve while their mother watched from a distance. "Mr. Guard," the boy asked, eyes wide with excitement, "can you show us the move? The one you did on the bad guy?" Daniel looked down at them, their innocent faces filled with awe. His first instinct was to shake his head, to walk away. But something stopped him. He crouched, lowering himself to their level. "It's not for playing," he said softly. "It's for protecting." The children nodded seriously, as if he had just imparted some great secret. The girl whispered, "You're like a superhero." For a moment, Daniel almost smiled. Almost. The shift in his co-workers was even more dramatic. Jeff and Marcus, the ones who had mocked him daily, now avoided direct jokes. When Daniel entered the break room, they quieted. When he walked past, they nodded awkwardly. One afternoon, Jeff tried to make conversation. "Hey, Reyes, saw the video. Didn't know you had moves like that." Daniel poured his coffee. "Said nothing," Marcus added quickly. "I mean, we always knew you were solid, man. We just, didn't realize." His words trailed off. Daniel left without replying. The silence he left behind wasn't filled with laughter this time. It was filled with guilt. Management's reaction. A week later, the mall manager called him into the office. "Daniel," the manager began, folding his hands on the desk. "Been hearing a lot about you lately. Customers have been singing your praises. Some even said they feel safer shopping here because of you." Daniel shifted uneasily in his chair. "Didn't like attention." The manager smiled. "I want you to know we appreciate you. In fact, we're considering a raise, and maybe using you in some of our safety campaigns, a kind of face of security." Daniel's jaw tightened. "No," he said simply. The manager blinked. No campaigns, just work." The manager frowned, but nodded. "All right. Just work, but the raise stands. You've earned it." The burden of respect at night, Daniel sat in his apartment and scrolled through his phone. Friends from years ago, people he hadn't spoken to since his judo days, had messaged him. "Is this you in the video?" "Not. Man, I knew you still had it. You ever think about competing again?" He turned the phone off. Respect was dangerous. Respect pulled him back into a world he had escaped. Respect whispered to him of the tatami metals, of the fire that once consumed him, and Daniel knew, if he let it, that fire would burn him alive again. Maria's words one night, as he made his rounds. Maria, the custodian, approached him. "Saw the video," she said warmly. "The whole world is finally seeing what I saw all along. You're not a fool, Mr. Reyes. You never were." Daniel looked at her, searching for words. At last, he said softly, I just did my job. Maria smiled knowingly. No, you lived your truth. There's a difference. The whispers didn't stop. Days turned into weeks, and still the video circulated. People came to the mall not just to shop, but to see him. Some whispered as he passed, others waved, and a few even clapped like he was some kind of celebrity. But Daniel didn't change. His patrol stayed the same. His stride was steady, his flashlight beams sweeping across cars with the same rhythm as always. Only his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Fame without asking one afternoon. As he checked the lot, a reporter intercepted him. Mr. Reyes. Daniel Reyes. Channel 7 News, she said breathlessly, holding out a microphone. Can we ask you about the night you stopped the thief? Daniel blinked. His instinct was to walk away. But the reporter was persistent. People want to know, how did you do it? Are you trained? Do you have a background in martial arts? The words pricked at him. A background in martial arts. For a moment, images flashed, medals, podiums, roaring. Crowds, his younger self raising a fist in triumph. Then he turned his back. No interviews. The reporter frowned, trying again. But the public sees you as a hero. Daniel kept walking. The weight of memory that night in his apartment, he pulled an old shoebox from the closet. Inside were fragments of a life he had abandoned, a gold medal, tarnished but still gleaming faintly, frayed judo belt, the fabric softened by years of sweat. A photo of him on the podium, younger, eyes fierce with pride. He stared at the objects, fingers brushing the belt. Memories surged, the taste of victory, the agony of his knee giving out, the betrayal of his coach telling him to step aside. He closed the box and shoved it back into the closet. His past was not for display. A talk with Maria found him. Again one evening as he leaned against a lamppost. You've become famous, she said with a smile. Daniel exhaled slowly. Didn't want this, I know, but maybe fame isn't the point. He looked at her, puzzled. She continued, You think people respect you because of that throw. But that's not it. They respect you because you protected them. You showed them who you are when it mattered most. Daniel frowned. Who I was? No, Maria said gently. Who you are, even now. Her words lingered long after she left. The children returned, the same children from before, found him again. Mr. Guard! The boy shouted, running across the lot. Guess what? I joined judo classes because of you. Daniel froze. The girl grinned. I'm going to join too when I'm old enough. Mama says you're the reason we want to learn. Something cracked open in Daniel's chest. He knelt down, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Then remember this, he said softly. Judo isn't about fighting. It's about control. About respect. You understand? The boy nodded eagerly. Daniel stood, his eyes glistening though his face remained calm. The sunrise patrol weeks later, the mall was quiet again. The frenzy had cooled. The video faded as new stories took its place. People still recognized him, still whispered. But the spotlight dimmed. Daniel welcomed it. One morning, as the first rays of sun broke across the lot, Daniel stood at the edge, watching the light creep over rows of cars. The world was quiet again, just as he preferred. But it was not the same silence as before. The silence carried weight, meaning, because now when people looked at him, they didn't see a fool. They saw a guardian. The final reflection, Daniel adjusted his cap, his silhouette framed against the dawn. His thoughts drifted back over the years, victories, defeats, ridicule, and respect. Once, he had chased glory. It had left him broken now. He walked a simpler path. No medals, no applause. Just quiet WATCHFULness. And yet, in the eyes of the people he protected, he had found something greater than medals. Trust, respect, gratitude. He didn't need a podium, didn't need a crowd. He was exactly where he belonged. A quiet hero,